and how we can all work together to make Scarborough a better place. And first of all, welcome everyone to our second Our Scarborough speaker event. We're so pleased to see such a high level of interest in this program. And we hope you'll come back often to hear from Scarborough leaders across a wide range of organizations and causes. And feel free to spread the word. We're still building our distribution list for our e-newsletters, because the more connected that SCRO can become with our many communities in Scarborough, the more effective we can be in connecting, promoting, and renewing Scarborough. And that's a theme I'll keep coming back to, because that's the mission of SCRO, working collaboratively through action and advocacy to connect, promote, and renew Scarborough. And this goes right back to the Renew Scarborough campaign launched by Scarborough's Rotary Clubs back in 2014. As Gerard mentioned, we do have a few minutes before we hand off to Dolf. So let me expand on this, because it goes right to the core of what SCRO is all about. First of all, connecting Scarborough. Connecting Scarborough isn't easy, as Scarborough has many distinctive communities, but we don't have to do this alone. Scarborough is blessed to have many local organizations, be it our neighborhood associations, our BIAs, our many vibrant social service agencies, our anchor institutions, including the Toronto Zoo, the Scarborough Business Association, Scarborough Arts, the Scarborough Historical Society, social media groups. I mean, the list goes on and on. All of these organizations have goals and messages that are important to specific constituencies within Scarborough. But they often don't talk to each other, which means that Scarborough as a whole doesn't build the kind of profile that we deserve, nor does it help us to get the help that we need. And that's where SCRO can help. As an advocacy organization with a Scarborough-wide perspective, SCRO can help to amplify those messages. And we can bring organizations together when collective action can help achieve a common purpose. That's the connecting role of SCRO. We're not a head office and we're not a federation, but we're an advocate. And we seek to be a thoughtful advocate. SCRO is quietly building relationships with politicians and with people of influence in our community. And we're taking our messages public with thoughtful advice when opportunities arise, be it through deputations, through OPEDs, or through learning opportunities like this one, and like the Community Association Summit that we hosted back in 2018. So that brings me to the promoting Scarborough part. That's the second theme of SCRO's work. We all know that Scarborough has many great features, but they're often overlooked by Toronto's opinion leaders, who continue to portray Scarborough in what I would call tiresome stereotypes. But in order for that to change, we have to promote all the good things that Scarborough has to offer, like the weekend, perhaps. And we have to promote that to others and also to ourselves, to create that sense of civic pride. Before I moved back to Scarborough 9 years ago, I lived in East York for many years. East York has that civic pride. People are proud to say that they live in East York. That's where I'd like us to get to here in Scarborough. Now, SCRO has some ideas regarding this, which I'm not able to share yet, but which I should be able to say more about in the next month or two as we work toward this promoting Scarborough objective. All that said, Scarborough does have its challenges. We know that. We have aging infrastructure, especially in our hospitals. We have inadequate higher order public transit, as we know, especially from today's announcement. We have fewer cultural amenities than other parts of the city. We have aging industrial parks, some of which have poor internet service. We have pockets of poverty and fewer social service supports, especially for our newcomer communities. This is the renewing Scarborough part of our work, because Scarborough is likely to experience significant redevelopment in the coming decades. Some of it will be gentrification. And it's important that we help guide this redevelopment to address these gaps and our deficiencies, while at the same time, as much as possible, preserving the character of Scarborough that's made it so unique and so welcoming to so many communities. So there's lots of work to do, and there's a role for us all to play to achieve this mission of SCRO, which is to build a strong and prosperous Scarborough that thrives within the city of Toronto. And I'm certainly grateful to have the support of so many passionate Scarborough leaders working with us on this. And many of you are on the call today, and I'm happy to have that. And if there's comments or questions, I'm very happy to take those as well before we hand off to Dolf.
Come on, folks, we got to fill up another 9 minutes. So we will start on time always, but we won't start ahead of time for those people who schedule themselves to come in right at 7.
Well, we can just resume our chatter if that be.
That's right, we can do that.
Larry, whereabouts were you living in East York?
I lived in 2 primary locations. I lived in Crescent Town for 15 years, 18 years, and a very proud resident of Crescent Town, I might tell you. I was very happy to live there. It was a wonderful community, even though it has some challenges today. And then I lived at south of Victoria Park and west of St. Clair in a community called Woodbine Gardens, which had a dormant community association, which sprung back to life to deal with a particular issue and then went dormant once again. So it wasn't until I moved to Scarborough that I began to fully appreciate the role and the impact that community associations can have on civic life. And when I moved to West Rouge, got involved in the West Rouge Community Association right away, and but unfortunately didn't have that opportunity where I lived in East York.
I'm from the Victoria Park, St. Clair area.
Whereabouts?
Probably going back farther than you, but
North of St. Clair or south?
South of St. Clair, midway between Victoria Park and O'Connor.
What street were you on?
Cedar Crest, Plaxton, Pliers.
What were you on? Cedar Crest?
Mm-hmm.
What number?
Yeah. 85.
Number 60.
Oh, jeez. You were across the street and down
northwest corner of Cedar Crest and Ferris.
Wow.
Wonderful community.
Yeah.
Wow.
Really
that is close. That is close. Yeah.
Yep. It's a small.
When I got
that's
married in 1969, Bob and I bought our first house on, oh my gosh, Queensdale Avenue, directly south of the East General Hospital. So we lived there for 10 years. Yeah.
Very nice area.
Yeah. And you're right. It had a huge, massive sense of community pride. Massive sense of community pride.
Folks, just announce a sister organization. Scarborough Business Association has the mayor speaking next Wednesday.
Yes.
So he always has a lot to say, and there's always a lot of people on the line, a lot of comments. So just to give a shout out to the Scarborough Business Association as well.
I think the cyber breakfast is the same Wednesday, is it not? Next Wednesday as well?
I'm not on the page, I'm sorry.
Cyber breakfast is the mayor.
Yeah. Mayor is speaking at the cyber breakfast.
Okay, well then it's the SBA that's next Wednesday then at night then. the SBA after 5.
Mm, yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe I've got the date wrong.
Okay, Susan, I think you're confused.
That's a possibility.
Does anybody else want to promote something? We don't have too many outdoor activities that we can go to and fundraisers
No.
and things like that.
Well, actually, you can. I don't know if you can tomorrow or not, but I live quite close to the mouth of the Rouge River, and the pond at the mouth of the Rouge River has turned into probably Toronto's largest outdoor skating rink for the past 3 weeks. It's
Oh,
because, of course, the city has so many rules on skating in city arenas. I guess people are saying, well, the heck with that. Let's just go to the mouth of the Rouge River and skate with nobody establishing rules about how we have to behave. So people are bringing down their shovels, and there must be 10 to 15 mini rinks, shinny rinks that are there. People are just sort of skating casually. There's learn to skaters. There's people that are passing the puck back and forth to each other along the ice. And the ice is really in very good shape because, well, first of all, the water level is really low. So, I mean, there's only about, not very much water. If you ever were to fall in, which is highly unlikely. And because the water is very calm, it's freezing well and it's freezing thick. So for the last 2 or 3 weekends, it's been quite a Canadiana experience seeing people down there taking advantage of the facility. Unfortunately, it's created a bit of a horror show from a parking perspective. These things happen. But it's great. It's great to see the Rouge National Park getting this kind of use and experiencing something that, for many of us who grew up here back in the day of reliable backyard rinks, to be able to see some of that happening once again in our backyard is kind of cool.
yeah. Larry, what street would that, how would you get there? I'm going to tell my daughter because she was wanting to take her kids skating somewhere.
See, Larry, now that
I've let the cat out of the bag.
yeah,
Exactly.
there's going to be too many people. Larry,
End of
now
Lawrence.
there's going to be too many people.
That's
It's right at the end of Lawrence.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now it's
I
gonna-
don't skate. I'm a
Lawrence still
terrible
goes
skater,
no
so.
farther than the Rouge River.
Yes, it does. Yeah, that's right.
Now it's going to
You're
get
right, I know.
warmer tomorrow, so it may not be as good for the next few days, but
Well, at least as long as the government types don't come along and do what they did to poor old Claremont. They
Yes.
salted that pond. Anyway, we still got a minute and a half to kill, folks.
If anybody wants to go ice fishing, great ice fishing at the lake that our cottage is on, apparently, everybody who spends all the winter there has been taking fish out of the lake like truckloads. So
Yeah, but we're not supposed to travel, remember?
no, you're not. But I think these people have gone there permanently for the winter now because nobody's working or nobody's,
Susan?
in
And they have
business.
to
Yes,
feed, so they drill a
Susan?
hole in the ice.
yes, ma'am.
Could be a good opportunity for you to get rid of those pancakes.
I've gotten rid of them already. Monday morning, they're come and gone. So
Sounds like an in joke.
No, she
No,
had a lot of pancake mix.
I got 81 cases of pancake mix from Griffiths Foods. So I just called a few people who were on the phone on the call tonight, asked if they wanted them for their food banks. So yeah.
Anyway, the clock is ticking down and I have it at 6:59 plus a few seconds. So Dave Hardy, I believe I turn it over to you now. So I'll ring the bell to get everybody's attention.
Yes, you do. And Gerard, perhaps we can mute some of the microphones except for Dolf.
Yep. Yeah, well, we'll ask everybody to mute themselves.
Okay, if you can
Please.
mute yourself. So,
And if I see anybody acting up, I just mute them.
okay, thank you. I'm so thrilled to welcome Dolf DeJong on behalf of President Larry Wadmore, Gerard Barbeau, and Mark Middleton, organizers of the Art of Scarborough series and the Scarborough Community Renewal Organization Board of Directors. I will, as Dolf is speaking, I will be monitoring comments and questions, and then we will be having an open period after Dolf is finished. And I'll be again monitoring questions and helping to facilitate that part as well. And we're planning to end up close to 8 o'clock, or as long as we have some comments and questions and so on. I've been always thrilled to hear Dolf talk, and particularly on the subject today of the pandemic as an incubator, innovator accelerator. And just a few words on Dolf. Dolf DeJong is the Toronto Zoo CEO. He is a passionate for protecting nature and understanding the challenges the world faces, and has a spirit of ruthless optimism. He's enjoyed an incredible career in conservation and wildlife protection and education as well. He began his role in the Toronto Zoo in September 2018, and Dolf, you've made a huge, wonderful impact on our community. And you undertook at that time a review of the organization and worked with the zoo team, developed a new strategic plan focused on saving wildlife and having passion about the zoo and delivering all sorts of great guest experiences. And you've done an incredible job connecting the community. I know that in the past, Dolf, you worked with the Vancouver Aquarium Marine Science Center, and you served as Vice President of Conservation and Education. You also have that international experience working with the Oceanographic Aquarium in Valencia, Spain, as they moved from a traditional aquarium to a conservation organization, and help them build a positive organizational culture and so on. In addition to your previous work in Vancouver, you also worked at the Royal Botanical Gardens in Hamilton, which is a great place. It's a wonderful place to go in the coldest winter day. Unfortunately, can't do it this year, but I always recommend that as a great place. And also the Director of Biodiversity Programs at Conservation Halton, at Conservation Halton, I should say, as a area park area manager, and also at Bronte Creek, Presqu'île, and Ferris as well. So you have a huge background in this area, and it just adds to what you're going to be sharing with us today. Well-educated background, master's at Wilfrid Laurier, BEd from the University of Toronto, and Bachelor of Science from Brock. So Dolf, I'm anxious to throw the floor over to you. And again, once we finish, we'll be taking questions, and I have a couple comments at the very end as we wrap up. But Dolf, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. And I don't know what to say if you have comments already. You haven't heard me say anything, so geez, no pressure. Thanks to all of you for choosing to support your community, be here tonight. You know, you could be eating dinner, you could be watching a Leaf game, you could be doing a lot of things. Many of you, I'm sure, have been on Zoom calls much of the day. So thank you for choosing to spend a bit of time with us tonight. Just before I get started, I'm sharing my screen. Can everybody see that? Good stuff. All right, thank you. So I'm going to hopefully get a bit of interactions. Does everybody know what these are? Just yell it out. It's kind of like, let's pretend we're actually in a big room together and there's a PowerPoint projector.
Ring-tailed lemurs.
Ring-tailed lemurs. Absolutely. So this is actually, these are our troop of ring-tailed lemurs. And I actually was fortunate, I was able to collect this video the other day. It's 15 seconds. I'm just going to play it for you really quickly. So, you know, pretty amazing footage that I get to go to a zoo. And as I watched it, I kind of felt like, geez, this is like a microcosm of COVID life. You know, this emotional roller coaster where some people are really focused, suddenly something happens and everybody snaps to attention. There's the bird in the back. Nobody knows what that person's up to. We're yawning, we're exhausted, we're tired. It just really made me giggle. And, you know, it's really been an incredible slog for so many of us. You know, a crisis that's unwound on anything we've ever seen. It's global. It's not as though it's something that's just in a pocket of the world like we've seen in other issues. It impacts our health and it can be fatal. It's not something to be trifled with. Depending on who you talk to, the recession or depression that it's brought with it. And then what we also saw was this long overdue awakening when it comes to social justice. So we have this incredible confluence of events. And at the same time, your zoo focused on biodiversity and climate change. So we have all these things coming together right now, and it's easy to really be caught up to it and just be wide-eyed and saying, okay, what next? And that's really been a key part of our question for the past year. Sorry, I'm trying to change slides. There we go. So what has all that meant for your zoo? Well, I think we all have key dates in our calendar. For me, March 13th, the initial announcement that we're closing. And that was such a dramatic time, if you recall. So for us, you know, we closed March 14th. We opened a drive-through mid-May. We welcomed our members back late June, walk-in traffic for all come July, closed again to walk-in traffic in November, opened another drive-through. Then we actually had to wrap things up on Christmas Eve, and we've been closed but still caring since then. And like all of you, our team has been working really hard, reading, reacting, and finding ways to serve our community and serve our mission. So for us, if we're going to talk about our story at the zoo, we actually have to back it up. We have to go back actually to April 21st, 2019. And that came out of a quick search. That's when our team and our board decided that within our zoo, within our team, and with my arrival, enough had changed that we wanted to update our strategic plan a year early. We had a 5-year plan. It was going to take us to the end of this year, but it didn't really seem to fit anymore. And that plan that we started on April 21st was actually approved the last week of February 2020. Many of you were part of that process. It was a pretty exhaustive community engagement piece. It's not where it needed to be when I think of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it was a great step for us. And timing wise, quite frankly, our zoo built the ark before it started raining. And little did we know how important that document would be. And that shift that lets us get to eventually talk about innovation starts with a simple update of our mission. You know, your zoo, it's about connecting people, animals, and conservation science to fight extinction. It's pretty simple. Great place to visit, fantastic. Really interesting revenue model, generating a lot of those fees through gate, retail, food services. But the challenge with it is, how do you do that when the doors are closed? What do you do when things actually stop so individuals can't walk in anymore? So our plan, I'm going to just spend a few minutes on it. It's predicated on some really simple values and this idea of one Toronto Zoo cares. First, we care about our animals. Our zoo, the animals we have there, they're going to spend most of them their entire lives there. That is a sacred duty for us. So they're the first thing we care about. A lot of people argue with me. They give me the whole Richard Branson says, you care about your people first. The people I work with, whether they're staff or volunteers, they get it. They get what it means to have to care for our animals to that level. Next, of course, is our staff and our volunteers, the folks who deliver the great work. Then, of course, our guests, our agents of change, and our community. And that's been a big part of my time at our zoo and our ability to really weather this pandemic is that incredible support we've seen from our community. And, you know, this being the audience it is, a group of folks who are so passionate about their zoo. I just can't say thank you enough for how well I've been received by this community. So I'm a big fan of simplicity. So when we actually worked through that plan that was setting us up for the pandemic that we didn't know was coming, 5 super simple key outcomes. 1, save wildlife. If you know the mission and it's a zoo, it kind of makes sense that we're folks passionate about making sure that there's animals on this planet for future generations. Next, igniting the passion. And that was really focused on our team of staff and volunteers and saying, you matter. We see you, we hear you. We want to do better by you to get your ideas and your thinking into our long-term planning. Create wow. They wouldn't let me say scar people in positive ways, so we had to find a better way of writing that. I truly believe visits to our site, make impressions on people that will really last a lifetime. And those folks go on to really serve conservation stories and animals. I think of Anne and his stag. I think of individuals like that who've gone on and done great things. Our zoo and our community. Well, little did we know when we wrote in our plan that we want to have a more reflective group of staff, guests, and volunteers, that we would be ahead of the curve for the tragedies that we saw unfolding in the US. George Floyd's loss, Breonna Taylor. We know racism is alive and well in our community, and we realized our zoo wasn't doing enough to reflect that community and serve that community. So we made that one of our strategic pillars. And the last one, which really proved to be effective, was this idea of revolutionizing zoo technology. We had no idea the pandemic was coming, but your zoo went from a site that was seeing maybe 2-3% online booking to the only place you could come visit was with a digital e-ticket, scanned without actually handing over any cash, a cashless society. So we really took some big steps. So let's just jump in our little time machine quickly and go back to late February 2020. I was on the top of the world. We had our new strategic plan that our board enthusiastically endorsed. Terra Lumina had launched in December, and we'd seen, I believe it was around 40,000 people in the first 2.5 months. We'd had the most guests visit our zoo in January and February in our history. We were moving, we were rolling, it was great. And then, welcome. Those early days, things changed incredibly quickly. From the time of the announcement on March 13th, I remember it well, I was downtown with our city partners, with other agencies and leads. From the time I went downtown to drove to the zoo, the plan changed from being open only as an outdoor site to being fully closed, as we lost 20 staff due to travel quarantine regulations that we weren't even aware of at 3:30, but by 4:30 had been introduced. Essentially we lost the left side of our infield and had to build our new plan based on that kind of COVID reality. So what we're here to talk about tonight, the pandemic as an innovation accelerator. And let me just start this with a bit of an apology. In no way am I wanting to make light of the pandemic. I know this has impacted people profoundly, including losing loved ones. So in no way do we not recognize that and really are saddened by that. But at the end of the day, for our zoo, it has been a very interesting catalyst and one I never would have expected. So just looking at the chat bar, if folks have their fingers handy, what do you actually need to fuel innovation? What are the ingredients for change usually? An open mind, yeah, absolutely. A need, a reason to do so, yeah, a catalyst. All of those I think are fantastic. For us, Dave, with ideas, you often with innovation, you have a new idea, you have a need and demand. Sometimes you have scarcity. You also need to have a team willing to and interested in solving the problem. A dream, absolutely, on the list. And you need a culture willing to take some risks, because there's not much innovation that comes without risk. And you also need a lot of friends who are going to help you. And for us, actually, it was interesting. One of the key things we needed, I have to go back to that image there. Think of the Wizard of Oz. What does this animal represent? Courage, absolutely. So we needed the courage to step up and say, okay, we may not be the zoo everybody is used to. We may not be the zoo that people love, but the pandemic did make some space for innovation, and it forced us to consider options that we'd never even thought about, or that we'd found ways to talk ourselves out of. It created that room. So that room, you know, is driven by, of course, those people. As we started looking at things for us, it also had to be clear as far as being rooted in our values. Whatever we were gonna do needed to be rooted in our 4 cares. Thank you, strategic plan. Every once in a while we get lucky in life. We knew we had to come together. We knew we had to be brave. And we knew if we didn't consider options that could fail, that we hadn't gone far enough. And that was the amazing thing. And our incredible team of staff and volunteers were the ones who actually carried us forward to make these things happen. So I kind of lumped it into 6 pots that I'm going to talk about tonight as far as what technology and what innovation looked like for us. And the first, I've just given it away, technology. The next was innovation in our outreach approach, friend-raising, fundraising, some innovation in animal care, and of course, our team itself and what it meant to look after them. So first of all, as is the case, you know, I'm a sports guy, so I apologize if some of the rhetoric comes out here, but you know, we had to decide how we were going to protect the house, no matter what. So we actually took that mission, connecting people, animals, and conservation science to fight extinction, and we actually put out a version at our door that staff went by every day. And it was our COVID-19 mission, which was to care for our animals and our staff no matter what. When things get complicated, when things get uncertain, we needed to have clarity on what we were trying to do. That was where we started every day. And that let us then build what else we wanted to add. And we knew we couldn't put a pause on breeding endangered species. Some of these cases, you know, there's double digits of these individuals left on the planet. 300 Vancouver Island marmots out there. Limited lifespans. We could not take a year off. So with those things looked after, we could step back and say, okay, what now? Well, all of you, I think, know this story. You know, probably our biggest single innovation after 46 years of only being a walk-in zoo. We said, come on in, bring your car. We hope it fits through this. And 200,000 people took part in that, replacing much needed revenue, keeping our staff busy, and was safe, touchless, and quite frankly, it was this important inflection point for our zoo team, because it kind of broke our brains. We're like, wait, if we could do this in 3.5 weeks, I think we should be betting on ourselves more frequently. We should be doing some other things. And this really opened up a lot of other opportunities for our team. In the background, what people didn't realize, even in those early days, we were also immediately making the pivot to say, how do we live our mission digitally more? So we actually brought this entire raft of programming out. You can see the various options on your screen. And started to go, what does meeting people where they are look like? What happens when we actually start thinking in a more accessible way for individuals who may not be able to transit 10 kilometers of trails? That's not actually manageable for folks. And we have just been blown away by the uptake. And really, it's been a bit of a slow burn, but of these programming. We delivered 100 of these programs in January. And what's interesting about it is they're all over the world. They are, with school programs, strongly focused in our Toronto and our GTA region. But we get these interesting outliers for folks tuning into our either school programming, our shout outs, or our other education-led programming. So we've just been incredibly blown away. And what's important for this context is this is an innovation that won't go away when the pandemic's over. Historically, we would not have thousands of students at the zoo in January. Kids are coming back from the holidays, it's -13. That's not prime time for our education programs. We've found a whole new way to effectively support our teachers, and we're cautiously optimistic that that support is going to continue to be demanded once we get to the other side of COVID-19. As far as on-site, I mentioned earlier, the biggest shift, the biggest innovation was a 100% move to a cashless world. All pre-booked tickets, timed entry to make sure we kept distance. We were also selling all our memberships in retail online, and that proved to be well received by our guests. And that assortment of programming you see there, we had so many things happen in 2020 that, quite frankly, the exercise of going through this presentation was fun to be reminded about. It's like, oh, we had a corpse flower. Oh, neat. We actually ran a very boutique Brew at the Zoo event with 100 people at a time, but we ran 4 different shifts, practicing social distancing on a massive part of the African savannah. We had a boo-mobile plan, but we had to shift that to drive-through. A holiday marketplace launched. Terra Lumina, which was only ever intended as a winter event, became a summer one. And one of the more frustrating things is actually on November, I believe it was the 20th, a few days before we closed in the last lockdown, for the first time, our zoo was given a site-wide liquor license. So when you're out at the zoo, you could have a glass of wine or a beer or a hot chocolate with something else warm in it as you enjoy your visit. So a few of the changes that came there. When we talk about reaching out to folks, an audience, those of you who are in the social media business will grab onto this. When you actually look at all of our platforms, we're now at over half a million followers. 558,000 folks on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. And that's a 50% increase from last year, which was fantastic. And we really routinely sit in the top 3 zoos and in the top 10 conservation organizations in North America as far as our reach. So telling Scarborough's story, telling Toronto's story, and doing that in really authentic ways. And it doesn't feel innovative to just tell your story. But we're now at 300 plus Facebook Lives. We have live cams on our gorillas, giraffes, and penguins at various points, and just meeting people where they are. And that digital push received a huge shot in the arm and a huge surge forward with the pandemic. When we wonder if people are that interested, well, our free school program we put out on YouTube the first week of January had 250,000 viewers in the first 7 days it was up. Our community is hungry for support, and we're pretty happy to be providing it. As far as innovation, one of the key pieces for us is no one does it alone. So we've been incredibly fortunate to have our friends join us. And we've taken an approach that some have questioned at times, but we have a core belief that you cannot solve conservation issues if you don't address social issues. At the simplest term, if you're struggling to feed your family, that animal that represents the next meal is going to be pretty tough to argue we need to save it because it's one of the last ones on the planet. So we need to address social issues to help address conservation issues. And this goes to the heart of our strategic plan and wanting to be out there. So as far as our community, not surprising, I don't think you'd be surprised by the folks on this list. Folks like Second Harvest actually had our volunteers redeployed to do packing of packages for families. So we were able to take some of our zoo assets, since we were largely closed, and have them support other members of our community. A lot of you were also involved in the food drive we did, where we, with our anchor institution partners, Scarborough Health Network, Centennial and UTSC, and Purelator, actually collected 7,000 pounds of food over the holidays through the holiday drive-through, as well as I think it was 27 skids of toys for our firefighters. So, really just stretching that reach and saying, we're not just going to be about conservation. As far as technology and academia, you'll notice Scarborough-based businesses or Eastern GTA-based businesses. How do we, in our quest to evolve and become one of the most technologically advanced zoos in the world in the next 10 years, how do we do that with local partners as much as possible? How do we actually look at those purchasing agreements and see who we're buying things from, and wherever possible, keep those dollars flowing through our local community? And of course, our great conservation science partners, Wildlife Preservation Canada and our government partners, all helping us get endangered species back into the wild. and I'll talk a little bit about them. The other interesting thing was our Toronto Zoo Wildlife Conservancy, who actually came online the year before, but really had some phenomenal successes. Starting with our Zoo Food for Life campaign, when the community rallied to raise $750,000 to cover our food costs when we couldn't have parking revenue anymore during the closures. They've also shifted again, embracing technology to have virtual zoo runs. I think we all missed, all you guys missed the 10K, right? The 10K Oasis Zoo Run. You guys do that every year? They've also been busy raising funds for our orangutan project as we work to get those animals outside. And now they've raised, with our city partners and the Conservancy, we're at 78% of our total fundraising goal, almost $8 million raised. Really excited about that. And that's something that I'll talk a little bit more later, opening this summer. Our retail team, starting to mix things up, introducing these mystery boxes where you pick a price point and they pack them up and add a little bit of value, and you have them come to your home. You don't know what it's going to be. It's not an approach to retail we've ever taken, but literally selling hundreds of them a week, giving people a little bit of joy in their life and mixing things up in what have been some pretty dark times. So I mentioned earlier that endangered species breeding we do, these top left there, you see our Blandings turtles, home in our Rouge, a story I tell frequently. 10 years ago, we counted 7 of these animals in our Rouge Valley. Every year we're we're raising, rearing, and then releasing. This year, I believe it was over 116 animals into the Rouge to reestablish breeding populations in our backyard. So really exciting stuff. When it comes to innovation in animal care, we've also been working with local technology partners to actually use AI and machine learning to monitor animal welfare. We're piloting this project with our orangutans, so we can actually have a 24-hour picture of how they're spending their time, and picture this just like the government cameras you all imagine, where they can see when you're running, you're walking, you're eating, you're sleeping. There's actually algorithms that can help detect what you're doing and break that down. They can recognize aggressive behaviors. So that is a key new tool that we're bringing online. And of course, times like this are really stressful. So we've had to take a big step back. We work with bears, tigers, lions, big animals that could do harm. And our team, when stressed, when distracted, all of us with a lot on our plates, how do we make sure in times like this we are safe? So we've actually been taking some real impressive steps, looking at how we keep those animals safe, how we keep our staff safe, and making sure the technology is moving and evolving with this. So innovating is all about your team. So how do you, and somebody said it earlier, I think it was John, in my notes here, I talked about creating room for dreamers and keeping them safe. How do you protect those folks who dream about different futures? And it may be uncomfortable. It may not include everything that you have in your life today. How do you keep them? And how do you keep them dreaming? And how do you do that in a pandemic where we also have that core need to protect their health, their physical health? So for us, one of the things we did, we actually made an organizational structure change. So we have a manager of safety and security who used to be our nurse, who's a registered nurse. So we actually shifted, so she reports directly to the CEO. I get firsthand information and advice from somebody who worked during the SARS crisis to make sure we can protect our team no matter what. We also have to be really nasty with people sometimes about sticking to the processes that'll keep you safe. Get away from each other, put your mask on, keep your distance, wash your hands. We are not gentle about these reminders because we care so passionately about our team's well-being. We've redeployed staff. We've had to shift up our team makeup to make sure we have that redundancy, that if we were to lose one of the staffing group in a pavilion, we still know those animals can receive world-class care day after day. And we've brought in some new tools as well. We have thermal cameras to help detect if people are running a fever. We have a new sign-in system, so people digitally go through a checklist every day. Also tracks who's in the office and who's not in the office. So if you need to do contact tracing, you have that data at your fingertips. Our volunteers, unfortunately, they haven't been able to be in very much through the year, but they've still been incredible contributors. I mentioned earlier they spent some time with the food bank. They've also been busy sewing masks for Scarborough Health Network and helping us contribute that way. Again, finding ways to stay busy, finding ways to support their community. And the hardest hit folks, and my heart goes out to them, our seasonal staff. And I think this is one of the stories of the pandemic. Our most vulnerable communities, the folks at those entry level, were the ones that really have been hardest hit with our closures, with those seasonal constraints. And we're just so grateful for their grace and continued support, and really can't wait to get them back. You know, that optimism of those brighter days ahead, it's tough. It's tough to keep focused on that, because everything we do is possible because of this incredible team that I get to be with. So what will 2021 bring? Well, for us, you know, our team is stretched, they've grown. It's incredible how different members of our team have taken turns carrying one another and helping us get through this. And like all of you, many of them are exhausted and want this to be over. But they're also excited to host guests again. We're excited to show off some of the work that's been going on while we've been closed. That animal care piece, of course, those other elements. And one of the projects that was deemed essential was the construction of our new orangutan habitat. So they're going to be able to get outside, they're going to be able to get elevated, get into the trees. And we're really, really looking forward to sharing that with our community, hopefully by summer. But again, we're all living the Stockdale paradox, never losing sight that there's a better future ahead while facing the brutal realities in front of us every day. We're also busy with doing a lot of design work with our commitment to being AODA compliant, Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities. That act requires us to take some real steps forward in the next 4 years. Quite frankly, we're way behind on this. We're really grateful for some support from government levels that we're still waiting for confirmation on, but we will be getting back to that, and we think it's going to be a great way for folks of all walks of life to more effectively enjoy our zoo. And many of you have heard me talking about the Community Conservation Campus. When I first applied to the zoo, one of the things in my cover letter was telling them about going to our Toronto Zoo in grade 3 with my mom and my friends, and I had a McDonald's ice cream cone, and I saw a Sumatran tiger, and I wanted to know why so much of it still looked the same. And I think that's one of those things. Earlier, somebody talked about the stigmas of our community, and our community is not the same place it was 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 25 years ago. So what does this renewal look like as we bring people together and have those places where people can gather and tell our Scarborough story in its entirety? A place of innovation, a place, you know, quite frankly, that it is the conservation hub of our city, with your zoo, the Rouge, a biodigester coming online in days. These aren't things that are common, so we really look forward to telling those stories. So with that, I will wrap up and say thank you very much for your time. It's always great to connect and talk about the zoo. I do miss guests tremendously and getting to do that.
Dolf, it's Dave Hardy here. I'd just like to, before we open it up to questions and comments, and we are getting some in the chat, I'd just like to thank you on behalf of SCRO and our members and others here on the call today. I was really impressed by your willingness to risk and try things that can fail. That's hard to do. Your outreach and partnership is incredible. Your virtual programming, I'm just blown away of how well that's worked for you. And also your considerable increases in followers and so on. I was really taken by you know, how you've reused and repurposed, in a sense, the volunteers while keeping them involved to help out in the community. And I'm so excited about the conservation campus concept. So just thank you. I know you're a very busy guy, and I just want to thank you for being with us today. And with that, why don't we open up the chat to questions and comments. So let's see, I can see one here. From John, as the world reopens, what's the one fundamental message you want the wider world to know and understand about us? and that makes us different and good.
My hope is that folks, whether it's an interaction with us online or a visit to the zoo, my hope is we get to a point where people start realizing that we're all in this together. There is no us and them when it comes to people and nature. It is just literally one Earth, and every choice we make has knock-on impacts. So with our new orangutan habitat, we're laser focused on palm oil messaging. And the Toronto Zoo Wildlife Conservancy is going to be releasing a report they did with the folks who do the Toronto, the Healthy City report. And it shows that folks who visit the zoo have a higher awareness of palm oil and rare earth metal mining and the impacts on animals, and make better choices. So we're really excited to do more of that work and really focus on those issues that really impact animals to help improve their wild populations.
Very good. Thank you, Dolf. The next question, it moves over to zoo revenue events and functions, and somebody with familiarity with the Detroit Zoo, and asking whether with the Detroit Zoo doing events such as weddings and corporate events and charitable events, birthdays and private zoo evenings and so on, would the Toronto Zoo be considering kind of that pathway as well?
Well, I have to say, I think, Jim, we've failed you terribly, because we do all those things.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, I wasn't aware, so that's good. I actually attended a wedding at the Detroit Zoo, and it was fantastic. First time actually to the Detroit Zoo, and I went back to visit the zoo just because of going to that wedding event at the zoo. So it kind of introduces people to the zoo if they haven't been there, and then they'll open their eyes. Wow, what a place! Let's come back, right?
Thank you, Jim.
I think it's one of those pieces for us that is a huge part of the conservation campus, is actually upping the level of that, and I'll call it a level of deliberateness, as opposed to, we're doing those things because usually people are passionate about us, as opposed to us creating a venue where you couldn't imagine doing it anywhere else.
Yeah, no, that's great. The conservation campus is fantastic.
Thanks. A comment, Dolf, from Bosco. He makes just on the fact that there's such neighborhood diversity in Scarborough, with people coming from countries all over the world, and how a lot of those animals are come from those countries as well.
Yeah, and just sorry, I can comment on anything, so you'll just need to cut me off if people need to go. I guess the joy of this is you just get to hang up. It's not as obvious as when you have to leave a room. One of the things that I've wrestled with is when you actually go to our zoo, you go to the pavilions, they tell the stories of animals, but they don't actually tell any stories to the communities that live around them. And when you look at the threats to wildlife, habitat loss, habitat fragmentation, poaching, bushmeat, we have to do a way better job connecting people and their impact on the animals and these animals. And unfortunately, I don't want to be bummer zoo, but we got to break it to people that animals aren't doing very well out there really anywhere, and we have to make better choices to ensure they have places to live for future generations.
Good, thank you. Another, I guess, a comment further to your working with the Scarborough Health Network, but whether there's any other insights or things you can share with us about working with UTSC and Centennial College, and any collaboration you have with those institutions as well.
Yeah, those two, as well as Scarborough Health Network, we have a memorandum of understanding with all of them. For instance, we did a Frontline Healthcare Heroes event together. We actually hosted them all at the zoo, and we had support from Centennial and UTSC, and had frontline health workers with literally blocks of time during the drive-through. In the case also of Centennial, one of their student groups has been developing an app for us, and that's been waiting to come out, but being closed, it's kind of on the shelf now. UTSC, we're doing a lecture series together featuring, they have researchers doing such amazing stuff, and I think most of you wouldn't be surprised that a lot of scientific publications are absolutely amazing documents that not enough people read. And the zoo can play a huge role in amplifying that important work that's being done and connect people to nature. So yeah, Wisdom and Craig and Elizabeth have all been incredibly supportive. of our zoo. But I got to tell you, just incredibly supportive of me. I'm a first-time CEO, and yeah, it's tough sometimes. I'm not trying to be dramatic, but they've just been incredible mentors, just on a human level.
That's wonderful to hear. Dolf, next question is more just to learn more about your management technique, specifically your comment about not being afraid to try options that fail. And at the same time, you probably then will have some sort of a mechanism or an approach that when there is failure, what's the point of kind of turning back or pivoting to try to move on to something else? In terms of how you manage that process?
Yeah, quite frankly, a lot of the directors, I work with some amazing folks who really make my life incredibly easy. I think screening it out, most of the stuff I see has been vetted pretty thoroughly. But I think of something like our holiday marketplace. It was just a great idea. We had 12 booths. We had local artisans all came to the zoo, and they were local and sharing their products. And first day we launched it was the day they announced that we were closing everything down in 3 days. So we'd invested, pretty substantially in that. And, our team, you watch them kind of mourn the loss of all their work. And literally the next day they're like, hey, here's what we can do. So I think that addition of kind of 2 words or a few words to our thinking, we can't do that yet. We add yet to a lot of things when we bump into things. And then this notion of, so now we will, and just, getting people clear that, when we bump into something, we're not going to dwell on it. We're not going to hang, we're not interested in blaming someone. We make good, educated decisions. And then if it doesn't go, we go, what did we learn? And we move really quickly. And it seems pretty textbook, but this team is just incredibly agile as far as their thinking. They're usually in front of me. It's been wonderful just to kind of let them run.
Excellent. Dolf, the next question comes more of how the community can help build through their own efforts attendance at the zoo, whether you and your folks have brainstormed incentives to have people buy family passes or annual passes, or incentives to invite other people along with them. And that kind of, have you explored that? And if so, do you have any insights?
Yeah, we actually we're going to be doing a membership review over the next few years. When you do buy an annual pass, you do get some discount passes with it. And prior to the pandemic, we were actually looking at, and we had approval to shift to a dynamic pricing model that would also impact our passes. So it's great feedback. It's something that I'll certainly add to our thinking for folks. And we want to be our community zoo. So we'll have to see how do we recognize that and do that effectively. Great,
thanks. So Dolf, we're bouncing over a few areas tonight. So the next one is a bit of a bounce. So it builds on an earlier point that Bosco was raising, and of activists, conservationists in various countries of origins of these animals, and whether there's been any thinking of profiling some of these people around the world as part of the zoo's international work, so that people can learn about how they're protecting animals in conservation areas and wildlife around the world.
Yeah, this is so important. We wrestle with this every day. There's a great post we got to put out actually today that a rattlesnake of ours that we've lent to the Columbus Zoo to be part of their breeding program, has offspring, and we're looking at being in a position where we can re-release these snakes, much like we do the Blandings turtles. So that's a U.S. option. But across the world, we support African penguin research and rehabilitation in South Africa. We work with the Ape Action Africa. We literally pay for a full-time person year-round in Madagascar to do monitoring and security for lemurs. So we haven't done a good enough job telling those stories and talking about the thousands of dollars we invest overseas. And a few things we're looking at to start addressing that. For instance, we have in the African savannah, we have something called Keisho Park, and we're actually talking about relabeling that after a real sanctuary in Africa and connecting to the work they're doing, their fundraising efforts. So folks who want to invest there can invest in those animals on the ground. And we're actually, it's a little early to talk about it, but we actually have a memorandum of understanding with the Kenyan Wildlife Service as well, to work with them from our, people don't realize we have Dr. Gabriela Mastromonaco, one of the most recognized reproductive physiologists in the world when it comes to animals, on staff at our Toronto Zoo. She's recently been appointed the Director of Conservation Science, and she's literally writing the textbooks on how we're going to protect these animals as far as their genetic material. As we're seeing these populations crash, how do we make sure we build those insurance policies to help those populations rebuild once we get their habitat set aside? It's some incredible work, and we need to do way more talking about it. So I really hear your point, and I'm excited to be part of that and working with our team to do more of that.
Dolf, that's excellent, and it brings up the SCRO newsletter and our communications. These are wonderful, great stories. I'm hearing about them the first time, and I'm just inspired to get that out to the community. But speaking of inspiring others, is there anything that SCRO could be doing with the Tourism Toronto or Toronto, say the city or other organizations of a government nature to help provide, shine a brighter light on some of the wonderful things that are happening?
I think first and foremost, I'd be remiss if I didn't start by thanking you for your advocacy for your zoo. I know a lot of you in your conversations with the decision makers are talking about the work we're doing and our participation here and our desire to take steps. That at its simplest, that's there, but we want to be part of this community. So when you're having those meetings, we want to be there. If there's new folks looking at settling in our community, how do we support them and ensure the zoo is an added value piece for them? And how do we, quite frankly, take these parts of what we do that are hidden? And one of my mandates, I say I want to make the hidden zoo go extinct. I think when I take people for a tour, inevitably they're like, I had no idea. And I'm like, I know. And it's a real frustration because, again, world-class staff are doing world-class things, and people have this idea of a 1950s roadside zoos, and that's not what your accredited conservation zoo is. These are folks who we need to get the story out because, quite frankly, animals need our help more than ever. And we are proactive. We're committed to continue to evolve. And the more you can do to help share those messages and, quite frankly, get the input. What else does this community want from its zoo? We're going through a new master planning process. And when I say new, it comes out of our strategic plan update and our COVID realities. We decided we didn't want to continue with the 25-year master plan written in 2016 because we don't think it reflects the landscape of our post-COVID world. So, we're going through those types of resets, and we'll be looking for your feedback in that as well.
That's wonderful. I could see all sorts of opportunities to continue the kind of the co-promotion between SCRO and the zoo as SCRO also builds and expands their both communications, newsletters, and membership base. Folks, we've got just a couple more minutes for questions. I have one that's a really naive question, Dolf. And then, folks, if you have any more final questions, then we'll start to do some closure. But this is do animals get COVID?
Yes, it's actually one of those pieces that is quite terrifying for us. And I was quite happy to have the lockdown announcement. Your primates, your apes can have it. There were a few gorillas at San Diego Zoo actually diagnosed with COVID, and we're grateful they've made a recovery. In New York, we've had a couple of the big cats diagnosed, and they've recovered, but they believe that was actually transferred from an asymptomatic staff person. Your feline, your swine, your pigs get it. You can get it. Your bats. I think it's 5 or 6 different groups of species who are susceptible. So when we talk about looking after our staff and animals, no matter what, our challenges around personal protective equipment, making sure we have enough surgical and N95 masks, so we're not at risk. It sounds silly, but practicing social distancing and making sure we're not too close to these individuals, even when we're wearing PPE, minimizing contact. A lot of those are practices that have been in place for a long, long time, but it's really made us take a long look to make sure we're doing everything possible to give them that world-class care they deserve.
Thank you, Dolph. We have had some more questions. So one was on the zoo master plan that's under development. Will it dovetail with the Rouge National Urban Park master plan?
Well, our goal is to avoid redundancy. I think you know, I'm incredibly proud of the work the zoo's done. You know, we've turned over parking lot 4. We've signed off pretty much all the land on the other side of the valley. And we did that because we believe in the value of habitat connectivity and in the merits of the Rouge. You know, as far as what they're doing, I think their master plan is known. We've shared that with our consultant who's doing the work. And I think we all want to be smart about how we invest our money. So we don't want to be redundant. If they're building something, I don't want to build the same thing right beside it. And we'll keep working closely with Omar and the team there. And you know, there's going to be some growing pains. You know, they're a big new neighbor. They're a big organization, yeah, we're excited to work with them and work through all that. They've been phenomenal with Blandings turtles, and yeah, it's all going to be just part of our ongoing growing relationship.
Great. And knowing Scro members, we've had a couple more humorous comments, which I'll let everybody read at their own pleasure. But the next one was, are zoo workers going to be vaccinated early as frontline workers?
Well, we haven't been identified yet, but you know, we're certainly you know, sitting as close as we can to those tables, be that at the Emergency Operations Center with the City of Toronto or Scarborough Health Network. You know, you've really kind of put your finger on a big, you know, ethical challenge. You know, we want to make sure we're not placing animals in harm's way. We also want to respect and make sure the most vulnerable communities get their vaccinations first. So I hope we can be in that group too, at very least, but time will tell. You know, in the US, we have seen that as the model. So we'll see where it goes.
Good. Dolph, thank you very much. We're starting to wrap up. So then if there's no other questions, I don't see any right now, I'm going to wrap up. So Dolph, thank you very much. Your response to the questions was just excellent. I think I learned just as much from the questions as I did from your presentation. So it's very helpful.